Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and mercenary adventurer of Gloomhaven. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to play Gloomhaven via Tabletop Simulator. So strap yourselves in because by the end of this video, you should be ready to jump in and play what is one of my all-time favorite board games. Now, in case you're not aware, Tabletop Simulator is a game on Steam that's basically just a 3D physics engine. You can load other games into it as user-created mods. And most board game designers are very supportive as it allows more folks to play the games and hopefully leads them to purchase physical copies and lets you play these games with others online that you might not be able to play with in a physical table together. So the mod I am using specifically is called Gloomhaven-Fantasy Setup Scripted UI, with scripted UI being in parentheses, and I will include a link in the description of this video. I'm using Tabletop Simulator because it's just way easier for me to capture video here than it is to actually show off the physical board game and try to put all that together. The components are all the same. There are a few little bits about Tabletop Simulator that I will go into in terms of the differences, but otherwise you can use this as a video for both playing it on Tabletop Simulator, specifically with this mod that I mentioned, as well as obviously playing the physical game. So what is Gloomhaven? Gloomhaven is a big box legacy RPG. I'm going to define those three things. I mean, big box in that it is a expensive game, literally a very, very big box with tons of components and a fairly lengthy playtime for every session. Legacy is basically any game that comes with sealed envelopes that you unlock as you play, as well as the game that you make permanent changes to by either affixing stickers or tearing up cards or all those different things. So it's kind of a relatively new genre of board game that has just existed for maybe the last 5 or 6 years or so and become fairly popular. And then RPG, in that you play as D&D style character classes who level up and gain new abilities and loot as you progress. It is all of those things. Two gameplay aspects make Gloomhaven particularly unique. One is that you are retiring characters and starting new ones as you play the campaign, so you are not playing as the same characters the whole time. You're just playing as the same party, but characters will come and go. The other is that it's an entirely card-based game. There is not a single die in the box, which is very different from, say, Dungeons and Dragons, which is obviously a very dice-heavy game where you are rolling dice to do everything. In this one, there is literally no dice whatsoever. It's all cards. So when starting Gloomhaven, my first advice is to hopefully play with someone who already knows how to play. I realize that many of you do not have that luxury if you're all starting fresh, but having someone who already knows how to run the monsters specifically is a huge help. Will cut down on time, cut down on any kind of errors that you make and all of that. I will definitely be covering monster focus in this video, but know that you really don't have to worry about running the monsters if you have somebody else that can play the game and you just want to jump in and join their campaign, for example. So the first thing we need to do is select a character. The game comes with 6 characters to start out of the box. There are, I believe, 17 characters total, which means you are unlocking potentially 11 other character classes. They don't look like this. They'll look like these envelopes on the left side of the board. I'll be explaining all these components as we go in this video. But this mod just in particular allows you to very quickly set up any of these starter classes by taking one of these and dragging them down here, which is where all the players are located. Just to go over quickly, and these are one cool thing about Gloomhaven is these are not the standard like fighter, mage, rogue character classes from D&D, although they very much do, for the most part, can fit inside of those archetypes. So the Brute is really an offensive melee warrior with maybe some light tanking, although nobody in Gloomhaven is necessarily a tank. Damage mitigation is a big part of this game and avoiding damage. The Cragheart is kind of a hybrid melee and ranged attacker and quite beefy, just kind of all around, just a great character, I think. The Mind Thief is a extremely squishy rogue slash kind of debuffing and crowd controlling character, probably one of the more complex characters, but certainly very interesting. The Scoundrel is a fairly straightforward rogue built for speed and high damage against single targets. Spellweaver is, of course, a mage, and like a lot of mages, can be quite complex. And in this game, I think is quite complex in how she has to run her hand. The Tinkerer is probably the only support class out of the starting 6, as well as having some kind of mage-like abilities at their disposal. So those are the starting 6. For the purposes of this video, I think we'll go ahead and start with the Scoundrel and the Brute. So I'm going to click on, for here, I'm going to click on Add Player, and I'm going to click on Add Player, and that adds these little mats. These mats do not come with the physical game. They're just a really good component of this mod. And then again, if you're playing the physical game, you're going to open up this envelope and you're going to take a bunch of stuff out. I'm going to take the Brute, and I'm just going to drop it right here and watch the magic happen. And this puts together automatically everything you need. This mod is so sexy. So within the character sheet, we've got our character token. And by the way, I don't plan on showing any spoilers in this video. I'm going to show obviously the very first scenario, at least parts of it, which is not considered a spoiler, but I'm actually going to keep even like personal quests and road events and those kind of things off of this video. So you won't feel like the need to, you won't be accidentally spoiled is the goal here. So within your character deck, and I apologize for occasionally zooming in and out. I'm having to scroll through my notes, which is going to have me scrolling, and unfortunately I have not locked the scroll in here. So if you see me scroll way out, it's because I'm scrolling down on my notes of things I need to go over. So within our deck, in our envelope, we have a character board, we have a modifier deck, we have 2 ability decks, which has already been separated between the ones we can use now and the ones that we can get in the future. In fact, our modifier deck is actually down here. This is the one that comes with the envelope. We also have specific character tracker tokens, and we have a character sheet. And then it uses this, again, this is just for the tabletop simulator, it uses a kind of manila envelope, whereas the envelope in the physical game is going to be right here. And you can always pull all of the components in this mod, you can pull out as you need them. So let's take a look at our character board, and you can hold down Alt to actually bring it up a little better. This is the Brute. I'll go over all the stuff in the middle as we get to them, but the important thing to look at here is in the upper right corner, you can see a number on some cards, and that determines your hand size. So the Brute has 10. We're going to make a Scoundrel right here. As our magic comes together, loading all the components. You can see even the mats are personalized, just a really cool mod. And our Scoundrel friend has 9, so not all classes have the same hand size. They'll have different, obviously very different cards, very different abilities, but also a different number of cards you can take into battle. So as you level up, you'll gain new ability cards, but you always have to follow the rule of having the hand size that appears in this character board. So in the case of the Brute, you can only have her have 10 cards in your hand. Now when we start, we've actually got all of our level 1 cards, and it's the number on the top. You can see here all of these cards have a 1, as well as there are 3 cards that have an X. So when you start off with a level 1 character, you've got all your level 1 cards, and you've got 3 X cards. It is recommended that you go ahead and just start with the level 1 cards, as there should be 10 of them here, and put the X cards in a sidebar, which the mod has down here. These are still considered part of your character. You can always swap them in as you see fit, but once you start a scenario, those are no longer in your hand. So it's part of the loadout that you choose, and the same thing goes for equipment. You will be choosing which cards you're actually going to take, and again, just for simple new players' sake, it is recommended to just take your number. And then once you play a scenario or 2, you can certainly put in X cards as you want them. For example, for the Brute, Skewer is a very great card to put in as an X card at the beginning. So we can go ahead and do that. So let's take out our X cards as just some extras that we're not going to be using right now. All right, again, as you level up, you can swap these cards, and we've got a sidebar here. So Gloomhaven is all about the turn-based tactical combat. Basically, if D&D were nothing but a series of combat encounters with some flavor text thrown in between and the occasional big choices to make for what scenarios to tackle or what you do during certain events. So in combat, and again, combat is what you're doing in this game, you're going to be playing 2 cards together. Each ability card has a bottom half and a top half. You can only use 1 half at a time. So each turn, you are combining the top half of one card and the bottom half of another card, which gives each character a ton of options. It's also important to give you some flexibility after you've selected your cards and then seeing what the enemy can do. So, for example, if I select Spare Dagger and Warding Strength, I can either do an attack 3, push 2 on the top with an attack 2 on the bottom, or I can use this bottom half. I picked a kind of a tricky card to explain. The bottom half of Warding Strength, will say, and then the top half of Spare Dagger. You can never use the top and bottom half of the same card. You can also use any top half as a default attack 2, which is in the lower left corner of the top half there, a little sword symbol in the 2. As well as on the bottom half, you can always use a default move 2 rather than what is actually listed there. Again, giving you some more flexibility once all the cards are revealed. Once everybody selects what cards they're going to do, select them face down. You all turn them over as well as the enemy's ability cards to determine what is going to happen that round and in what order. That's just a very, very quick overview. So before we start our adventure, we need to do a few other things with our characters. We have starting gold, which we can use to buy some loot. We also need to pick up a personal quest, which is our hero's reasons for adventuring. Now, the personal quest is critical as it determines when we retire our character and what we unlock when we do retire, which is usually a new character class to play. That's typically how you unlock new characters. Over the course of the campaign, which can take anywhere from 60 to almost the entire 95 scenario campaign, we'll be retiring, unlocking, and playing new characters constantly, each character of which has their own strategy and playstyles and ability cards that can all level up. This is part of the awesome joy of this game. Now, for personal quests, we draw 2 and keep 1. I have mixed feelings about the personal quests. They're located right here on the Tabletop Simulator mod, by the way. And this is what the card backing looks like. Again, I'm not actually going to show them. I don't know if they're considered spoilery or not, as you are only supposed to, like I said, draw 2 and keep 1, and you really don't know what they're all supposed to be. But I will just mention that I have mixed feelings. I think they're an awesome idea and concept, but some of them are just kind of awful to have to tackle, especially if you're only playing with 2 players. I would recommend looking into kind of house rules or adjustments if you draw one that seems a little crazy. Like, again, I don't want to spoil too much, but there are some that you just read that and you're like, I don't see this happening very often at all. I would also suggest we're not necessarily going after the ones that tell you to like complete certain scenarios in certain areas, for example, at the beginning of the game, because there's not a whole lot of scenarios unlocked yet. So I wish there was a method of putting them into like, here are the quests you should get at the beginning of your campaign, here are the middle campaign, and here are the end campaign. I think that would be a lot more balanced. So just be aware that personal quests are not well balanced at all, and feel free to kind of look up some more information about that if you're willing to go a little bit into spoiler territory and figure out which ones are better suited for, because retirement is a big deal. You don't want to wait. You don't necessarily want to retire too quickly, but you also don't want to wait too long to retire. For example, it should be pretty rare that a character actually makes it all the way up to level 9, for example. During our first physical game of Gloomhaven, our first characters made it all the way to level 8, and we chose 2 personal quests that happened to take us a long time, and we played 20 plus scenarios with them. So it can still be a lot of fun to have a high level character, but the game I think is a lot of fun if you are specifically unlocking new characters quite consistently. I'm going to move these out of the way. And again, you don't need these mats at all. This is just to kind of show you can easily drag all the components you need out of here and then plop them down like that and make the magic happen. So for starting loot, we start with 15 times our level plus 1 in gold. So at level 1, that is 15 times 2 or 30 gold, which we can use to buy any of the Prosperity 1 items. Prosperity is essentially what level the town is, which is tracked right here under the awesome map of the world we have. Prosperity does 3 things in the game. First, it unlocks new items for sale at the shop. It also lets you start new characters at higher levels. So again, when you retire characters and start new ones, if you're at Prosperity 3, you can start that new character at level 3. So it's a great tool to kind of have a new game plus feeling where you can start a character already at a certain power level. It also allows you to unlock new content in the town records, which you don't start unlocking and reading until you retire your first character. I don't think that's a spoiler at all, because it tells you get to unlock it when you retire your first character. But as you raise in prosperity, you'll be able to dive deeper into that book, which will unlock new content as well. So prosperity is good for everybody. Definitely want to raise prosperity as much as possible, and you'll usually get it as a reward from scenarios and from doing various events, as well as retiring will add another tick to the prosperity. And there's some things I'm not covering in this video. For example, retirement. Definitely read and reread the rulebook on those things because they won't come up until after you've played many games of Gloomhaven. There are no limit to the items that you can own, except I believe you cannot have duplicates of the same item. Now, there are limits to what items you can equip. You can only have one in each slot, so one pair of boots, one chest piece, one helmet. You can either have 2 one-handed items or 1 two-handed item, denoted by the number of fists here. You can also have a number of bag items equal to half your level rounded up, which means at level 1, we can have 1 bag item. And to use this mod, you can literally click on that button right there, and it lists all the items you can purchase up here. So there are recommendations in, I believe it's either the rule book or the scenario book, which shows you what recommendations are for each class. I will go ahead and say that the Boots of Striding are widely considered one of the best items in the game, which doesn't seem that sexy just to read it, but movement is always a good thing, and pretty much every character can benefit from moving, and they are usable every rest instead of being completely spent. So if you look in the lower right corner, some items are spent and others are consumed. If it's a spent item, it means you get it back whenever you rest. If it's a consumed item, which is that X in the lower right corner, it means you can only use it once per scenario. Now, you never lose the item. You still have it in your inventory. You just kind of flip it up. You flip it, turn it over, and that's it. You've used it once per that combat round. So I would say Boots of Striding are probably the single best item here. Followed by pretty much all these potions are good. Stamina potion, healing potion, and power potion. Invisibility cloak is also great. And for really anybody that has group AoE nuke spells like the Tinkerer and the Spellweaver can get a lot of use out of the Eagle Eye goggles, gain advantage on an attack. So those are good items that you can purchase. Again, make sure you are limited by the bag items, half your level rounded up. And again, for Tabletop Simulator, you can just click that button and click it again to put them back there. I'm not going to go through the motion of actually buying these items, but that is something you should do before. You can also just keep your items if you want. Obviously, your character sheet has room for your XP as well as your gold, so you can hold on to gold as much as you want there. All right, where are we? So we've got loot, we've got personal quests. So in Gloomhaven, we're going to be adventuring in and out of the city by tackling scenarios in each play session. New scenarios will unlock upon completing other scenarios, as well as from city events, road events, and personal quests. In the beginning, we have only the one scenario, which is number 1 Black Burrow, which I don't think is on this map yet. We're going to go ahead and add it. And I believe this is how the game is supposed to start. You affix literally a sticker onto the map, and all the possible scenarios are spread out on this map. You can buy removable sticker sheets as a separate purchase for the physical game. And that way, if you wanted to, you can always take the stickers off to reset the game. And obviously, for the digital version, that really doesn't matter because you can easily start up a new copy of this server, as I did to show off this video. So we've got number 1, Black Burrow is our only option. As part of the play session, assuming you're in the city, you can do any shopping that you like. You can, buy any of the loot cards here with our starting gold of 30 gold. We can also donate 10 gold to, I don't think it's a spoiler, because you donate 10 gold to the Sanctuary of the Great Oak, and once you do that 10 times, you unlock one of the envelopes. And again, all the unlocks are included. I think at the back of the rule book, it kind of tells you this is a good resource. Really good rule book. I'm going to go over things so you don't have to necessarily glean all this immediately. So right here is the important part of the rule book that tells you what you unlock. So right here, donate a total of 100 gold to the Sanctuary of the Great Oak. You open envelope B. For example, if you gain certain achievements, you gain A. If you have reputation, go somewhere. Just be mindful of this as you're playing the campaign. The donation thing, if you donate 10 gold, you get to add 2 blessed cards to your modifier deck. I'll go over what that means. But you definitely want to do that as early as possible. You are limited by the fact that each character can only donate once per trip to the city. So just keep that in mind. You can only do it once while you're in the city. The other thing you can do is you can do a city event while you're in the city, and Tabletop Simulator nicely lays out our city events from 1 through 30 here, which are the ones that you start with, as well as road events 1 through 30. And then you've got other ones that are added to the game. Again, this is a legacy game with some components you don't add until it tells you to add them. City and road events are fun little story moments that everyone can engage with and make choices for. City events usually result in positive outcomes, while road events are often harsher usually representing random encounters in the field. Every event has 2 options to choose from, so we would draw a card. And again, for city events, just once per anytime you're in the city, you do a city event. And then while traveling to a new location, assuming that dungeon or scenario is outside of Gloomhaven, you would do a road event. So you would read one side, you choose either A or B, option A or B, and then follow the instructions on the opposite side for only that choice, which is A is on the top, B is on the bottom. I'm not going to do them here because for spoiler reasons again, but make sure you do one city event every time you're in Gloomhaven and one road event anytime you're traveling to a new location. These events a lot of times can add like prosperity, or they'll unlock entirely new scenarios. They're just generally you want to do that. Now, sometimes it'll be like, oh, you got, attacked by wolves, and now you start off this scenario slightly damaged. Like they can obviously be very bad as well. There is iconography you need to pay attention to on whether a city event or road event is shuffled back into the deck, or if it is essentially a lost card that is then never used again. You can put it back in a box somewhere if you're playing the physical game, or just delete it off of the tabletop simulator. I can't show that iconography without showing you one of the things, but it'll look like kind of a shuffled deck if you're supposed to put it back in the deck, or I believe an X card, kind of similar to the way the lost cards worked on the prosperity and everything else. There's also that lost card symbol, I believe, on, the ability cards right there. I believe it shows a similar symbol if you're supposed to get rid of that card, so do note on that. And certain choices might be this choice, you keep the card in there, and the other choice, you get rid of the card. And some of them might have a requirement, like you need to be one of these classes to be able to do this choice, or you have to be able to pay gold or something like that. So it's pretty self-explanatory when looking at that stuff. Also, whenever we retire and unlock characters, we add events to the deck. Since I'm not covering character retirement, I'm just going to mention what you need to look for. And again, the tricky thing about Gloomhaven is I'm teaching you all this stuff to play the game, and a lot of this stuff doesn't come into play until like many games later, hours and hours later. So just, always go back to the rulebook and see. I'm going to flip this over. You can see there's a cool flavor text here. There are 2 numbers in the lower right corner of every character. There's a left number and a right number. The exception being the starting 6 characters do not have a left number. The left number represents the city and road events that are added to your usable deck, which again starts out at this 1 through 30 for both of them. And for this mod, you're supposed to put them up here to denote your active events and then add the numbers in as you need them. When you unlock the characters, the left number, once you unlock this character class, you need to add those events to the deck. The right number tells you what events to add to the deck when you retire this character. So just pay attention to that. Retirement sets off a lot of different things, but that is something that's easy to miss, is that you unlock new city and road events when you unlock a character, as well as when you retire a character. So a lot of times you're obviously adding 2 new sets of events because you'll retire one character and unlock a new character class. So just pay attention to that. All right, so I believe we are on our way to the Black Burrow now. If we've done our road event, we need to set up our scenario. One thing that it's very easy to miss, though, is our modifier deck. So you do not use the modifier deck. If you're playing the physical game, they are little small cards. You do not use the actual cards that are included on the envelope. That is kind of unintuitive and confusing for a lot of new players, and I totally get it, because every deck, again, if you're playing the physical game, it's going to be in these envelopes. You're going to get this little deck of modifiers, which are going to be way sexier and more impressive than what you're supposed to start with. These are instead represent the ones that you can add when you level up. They represent you getting stronger. So they are personalized to each character as perks right here. That's how you gain them. Instead, every character should add a set standard attack modifier deck. There are 4 of them because the game supports up to 4 players. In the mod here, they are located here. In the physical game, they're just wherever in the box, but they are denoted by the fact that actually I need to search one that's already been placed. You can see there is a number 1 in the lower left corner. Obviously, player 2 will have a number 2, and so on. So that is the modifier deck you should use. You should not be using the ones with the character symbol in the lower left corner. That is going to make you way more powerful to start at level 1. So the modifier deck includes a lot of +1s and -1s. This is kind of equivalent to rolling your damage dice, essentially. So if you notice, on our attack cards, it lists how much damage it does. And then once you play that card, you then draw from your deck to determine how that damage is then modified. And there is a crit, there's a ×2, and there's a miss, a null. So that can definitely happen. So there is some variance, but it's not as random as rolling dice, for example. So I think it's a really solid system. But just note, I'm going to press the R button to shuffle these just in case. Just note that you should be using those and not these, but do keep these handy for when you are leveling up. Same thing with this extra advanced ability deck. You'll see that there's a number. Obviously, they will be 2 through 9 because that's as high as you can go in the game. And we'll be adding those cards to our, not necessarily to our hand, but to at least the cards we can then choose to put in our hand in the future. So I'd call this the sidebar. I don't know if that's actually got a proper name in there. All right, so we've got everything that we need to enter the dungeon. Again, I'm skipping the personal quest and I'm skipping the loot just in the interest of time. But you definitely want to get those things done. Well, personal quest in the interest of spoilers and loot in the interest of time. But you should be having those things when you start. We definitely want to name our characters. For the purposes of Tabletop Simulator, the party sheet is over here. You can include your party name, location, and notes. Notes are, I mean, it's none of those are really important. The important thing is you keep track of your reputation, which can modify your price as well as unlock certain other classes. The most important thing here, though, is to include this little bit. So whatever our names are, we need to put those at level 1, and then keep up with this level screen, because for Tabletop Simulator, that is going to determine what level we are playing our scenario at. This is a very easy thing to miss because the challenge level of the scenario, and again, every scenario in Gloomhaven, which is part of the magic of this game, can be scaled for number of players and for levels, which is great because you can go one scenario, you can play 4-player on hard, and the next scenario you can play 2-player on easy and still be part of the same campaign and nothing breaks. It's just, it all works out very beautifully. For the challenge level of the scenario, you come up with it by taking the average level of all party members and then dividing that average by 2. And that's the thing that a lot of people forget. A lot of people think it's just the average level, but it's actually the average divided by 2 rounded up, and that determines your challenge level. So for example, at level 1, if we have 2 players at level 1, obviously the average is 1. We divide that by 2, we come up with 0.5. Rounded up, that is 1. So we're going to be playing at challenge level 1. And we're going to stay at challenge level 1 all the way up until we have if we're playing 2 players, until we have a character who is level 2 and a level 3, because then that would make the average party level 2.5. If we divide that by 2, that is 1.25. Rounded up is 2. So that would be scenario level 2 at that point. And that's an easy mistake to make. Now, you can technically play your scenario level at whatever level you want. It just increases the difficulty of every enemy. All the enemy stats instantly increase as you go up in challenge level. But so does the amount of bonus XP you get, as well as the amount of gold that all the coins are worth. So you can totally play the game on hard, very hard, extremely hard if you want to. I would recommend taking the opposite approach, at least in the very beginning. It's very easy to fail the opening scenarios if you don't know what you're doing. Even if you have a player that knows what they're doing, the game really doesn't pull any punches. And really, anytime somebody's playing a new character too, but that's also exacerbated by the fact that you are playing, a new game for the first time. So I would definitely play the game on normal or maybe even easy, especially if you fail it the first time and you feel like you just don't know what you're doing very well, because there is some difficult tactical stuff that you need to wrap your head around. Scenarios can also be built for 2, 3, or 4 players. In order to show that, we're going to have to generate a scenario. So for Tabletop Simulator, again, this is an amazing mod. I just clicked the Add Play Area button, and that instantly added this very, very helpful system where I can add my element infusion board. I can add a modifier deck for the monsters. I can instantly track health and experience for players. I can create elements. I can place cards and instantly put them in the discard and lost pile. I realized half of what I just said makes no sense to you yet, but this is an amazing tool for keeping everything organized. If you're playing the physical game and you want to keep things organized, I highly, highly, highly recommend using the Gloomhaven Helper app / browser website. It is 100% worth doing. If you're a purist, feel free to play the physical game without anything else, just all the components in the box. And I get that, and I think you should do that the first couple times. But after that, try Gloomhaven Helper, and I would presume there's probably a 90% chance you will switch over to using that, because it just makes everything better and you can focus on the fun rather than the bookkeeping. So I believe we are ready to start this scenario. Again, I skipped personal quests and loot, but make sure you are doing that. In order to start the scenario, you'd have to go through the scenario book, which looks like this in the physical game. And it will tell you, oh yeah, here's the starting equipment right there at the beginning of the scenario book. You'll need to read this flavor text. It'll open up the location, Blackborough 1. You'll gain a global achievement. You want to keep track of that on the map board here on the tabletop simulator. Is located here, or there are stickers to be placed on the physical board. And this is what the scenario book is going to look like. It's going to tell you what tiles you're going to put out, what little overlay pieces, if there's any coins, if there's any treasure chests, what enemies to use, as well as where you're supposed to start. You can see everything listed down here. There's the map tiles and stuff. I'm not going to necessarily break this down, but this is for folks playing the physical game. You'll need to put all this together, and that's part of the setup for every scenario. For people playing this tabletop simulator mod, you can go to Game Setup, and you can select what scenario number we want to do. We want to do number 1. And you can just click Create Map. There are 2 rooms. You can two versions you can do here: hidden rooms and revealed rooms. There is some debate in the Gloomhaven community about how much exactly you are supposed to know about a scenario. Obviously, this is what we see, so we can see all the information here. But there is some debate on whether people try and like cover part of it up and not look ahead and all that. And I get both sides of the coin on this. I think it's interesting to go where you don't look ahead, and it's interesting to see what is ahead. I believe rules as written, you're supposed to be able to see everything except the enemies. You're not necessarily supposed to plan ahead for like what enemies are placed where in a room, for example. But I'll let you all do that as your gaming group. You can decide how much information that you want to show versus how much you want to stay hidden. For the purposes of this mod, if you literally do hidden rooms, it only does 1 tile at a time and only reveals the next room when you actually open the door. So rules as raw, you actually do get to see all the rooms, but what it still does is does not spawn the enemies until you click on the next room, which is important. So we're just going to click on Create Map. And what that's going to do is it's going to put everything together in the opening room. You can see we've got our monsters set up, their ability decks are set up, the scenario booklet is helpfully drawn right here, and literally all the tiles are already put into place. It's freaking beautiful. Obviously, those of you playing the physical game will need to be doing all this work yourself. For the purposes of monsters, you want to make sure they are on level... Oh, that's not right. They should not be on level 2. Why did it spawn level 2? It should not have spawned level 2 monsters. Not sure why it did that. Was I on hard mode? Or was I playing on solo? That should not be the case. These should be level 1 monsters. So for that purpose, I am going to... Let's see. Need to take... Let's see. Can I take part of this? Can I... Oh. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to take this and actually move it manually to level 1, as that's what it should be for the purpose of this adventure. All right. I'm not sure what I screwed up there, but it should have spawned level 1 monsters. Yeah, it says scenario level 1. Come on, game. What are you doing to me? All right, well, I was able to fix it right there. But anyway, you see the number in the lower... I'm glad I checked. The upper left corner should be the number of the scenario level that you are playing in. This determines the monster's stats. So normal is on the left side, elite is on the right. We've got health, movement, attack, and range, if applicable. If you're setting the physical game up, you'll need to note how many players you're playing with, and that will determine which enemies go on the board. We're going to use the upper left, upper right, and bottom sections of this little hexagon for our enemies. So for 2 players, which is what I've got it set up for now, we're only looking in the upper left corner of every single standee. If the upper left is black, that enemy is not spawned. If the upper left is white, it is a standard enemy. And if the upper left is yellow, that is an elite enemy. If we were playing with 3 players, we would look on the upper right corner for all of our things. If we're playing with 4, we look on the bottom. That is how every single scenario can scale for 2, 3, and 4 players and still use the one single map together. So that's why you see all the enemies here, but only 3 of them here, because most of them are blacked out on this scenario book. So it is correctly set up for that many players. Unfortunately, I need to also update their life, don't I? Because it spawned... Let's see, can I spawn another one? I think it's going to spawn a normal, though. Yeah, it's going to spawn a normal. Let's see. I'm going to show you some stuff you can do with this one already. So you can do monster setup. We can go elite. We need to grab a, what is that called? A bandit guard. And spawn a monster. And you can see there we spawned the bandit guard that we need at the correct number of health. So it should be 9 health for an elite and not 10 health. So come here, you. You are too strong for us ever so slightly. You get to be added, and I guess the same thing for the normals, isn't it? I need to respawn those. Actually, those already have 6 health, so they're fine. That's the only thing that changes with the actual standee is the number of health, so that's something I had to watch. So we're going to put our tokens wherever we can start them, which is denoted, obviously, by the start here. Our minis, I guess I should say. I'm going to turn our minis facing me because they've got a handy plus and minus area where we can obviously change our health as well as using these little shortcuts here. Before we begin, we need to pass out battle goals. Battle goals are something I can show. I don't believe they are spoilery. And I am going to deal... let's see. I need to... so, let's see. For now... There's 2 things you can do. Well, so I'm going to show things differently if I'm playing a solo game, obviously, versus double. I'm going to deal... Let's see, did that work? Did not work. I need to deal to all selected players, or I can deal... Let's see, which are the colors here? We've got red and white. Let's go ahead and take over red. So you can see here I've just jumped into red, which means I get the hand located right here. And I'm going to try to... deal to all selected players, but that did not deal one to you. Okay, I guess I have to be in the game for it to actually properly deal. So we are going to... what happens if I just choose... What was it? White was the other one? Yeah. If I choose white... Deal to white. That does work. Okay. So we're going to deal one more to red, and then one more to white. All right, so before you start a scenario, this is also a very easy thing to miss in Gloomhaven. You're supposed to deal out battle goals. They're optional objectives that we should try and accomplish in addition to winning the scenario. If we complete them, we get a check mark or 2 added to our character sheet located right here. Click, click, like that. And then 1 click for check mark. Every 3 check marks that we get, so every 3 completed battle goals, or if you can see some of battle goals actually include 2 checks. So once we fill out one of these checks, then we can add a perk. And a perk is usually you only get a perk when you level up. So it's pretty cool when you can complete battle goals and get extra perks. As you can see, the perks allow us to add some of the cards from this advanced modifier deck into our standard modifier deck, or take out bad cards from our starting modifier deck. So the Brute can, for example, remove 2 of their -1 cards, or even replace a -1 with a +1, or get even sexier cards, adding a +3 card. Adding a, I forgot what the terminology for that is, but it's a draw again and push card and all these different effects that you can have. So they're all very nice to have. So battle goals are good, but you do have to complete the scenario first. So that should always be your primary goal. Battle goal is just a fun optional objective that you should try to also go for. So again, these are not necessarily spoilery. So for example, loot a treasure child during the scenario. I think there's always, almost always 1 treasure there. That can be a difficult thing for the Brute to necessarily do in this room. The other option is to gain 7 or fewer experience points, which is worth 2 perks. Now, that kind of sucks to gain that not much experience. I don't like this one, but getting 2 check marks is pretty good. So maybe we can keep that one. So we are going to put that away, and then to switch over to the rogue. Allow none of your character allies to become exhausted, and hit point value must be equal to 2 or less at the end of the scenario. Well, we are definitely going to be a protector there because we're going to assume our Brute is not going to become exhausted at the end of this fight. So we've got our battle goals, which means we are ready to finally begin this scenario. Look at that, 40 minutes of just kind of overview and stuff, and we haven't even actually got to the minutiae of combat yet. All right. So time to begin. To start, the only information we know are the enemies in this first room. Again, if you want to, you can look at the book and determine what's coming out. But That's what we've got in front of us. We can start on any of these starting tiles. We've got the enemies here. We don't yet know what they're going to do. We do know their stats based on the challenge level that we're playing at. They are level 1. We know the elite has a built-in shield, which means he's going to mitigate 1 damage for every attack we do. We know the starting health. We know their basic move and basic attack, but they've got their own modifier deck, which I'm going to go ahead and shuffle here. There. That they will draw, just like how we are playing our cards. It determines what they are going to do every turn. And we don't know that information yet. So just before we even know that, we have to be able to play the cards from our hand. Every player is going to select 2 cards that they are going to use as their ability for that turn. We're going to select them at the same time. Well, not necessarily the same time. We're going to have basically make sure everybody is ready to go before you begin the next phase, where we flip our cards over, and then we determine the initiative for everybody, as well as what time everybody is going to deploy their attacks and what they're going to do. You can actually choose, even though we've put our cards out there, we can still choose which halves of which cards we want to use. For the purpose of this mod, we're going to be using this area up here. And it's always the number in the middle is your initiative, and it's always the left card you put, or if you're playing the physical game, just whichever card you denote is your initiative for that turn. And it's the higher initiative allows you to go earlier than a lower initiative. You can see the Scoundrel is typically pretty fast, so you only really need half your cards to have good initiative to go fast, because again, you're only playing you're playing 2 cards at a time every time. So let's get at least a couple sample turns of Gloomhaven. So I put everybody back a little bit, because the biggest thing you don't want to do in Gloomhaven is get hit by enemies. You really don't know what they're going to do, but you can kind of maybe gauge their movement. And part of the fun of this is, like any RPG, once you've played with enemies a bunch of times, then you know what they're going to do and can get a feel for their strategy and can respond accordingly. At the beginning, like the first time you see a new enemy, it's kind of exciting and scary because you really don't know what they're going to do. So for our brute, this is what our hand looks like. We do have a ranged attack with spare dagger. We have an AoE attack. You can see the gray hex denotes us, the red hex denotes them. If we want to set that up, you can kind of instantly see how that can come into play. We can turn on a shield, although then we wouldn't be able to move. We don't necessarily need to move here, though. We might assume that the guards are going to come towards us, but they also might not, so that gets pretty tricky. We can loot items. We can pierce a shield, which could be pretty nice. We can turn on retaliate if we just want to move up and retaliate. That would require us to go pretty quick. I know our Scoundrel friend is going to want us to go to get in melee range, because the Scoundrel has cards that allow them to perform better if they've got allies in melee. Now, in terms of what you say to your partners, your fellow teammates, and Gloomhaven is a cooperative game, is also up for debate. You can choose to be open with your strategy, or you can choose to not be open. Rules as written, you're only supposed to be pretty vague about what you want to do. Like, I'm going to go attack this person, or I'm going to plan on resting this turn. You can use those kind of things. You're not supposed to say, I'm going to use this ability, I'm going to go at this initiative. You're not supposed to, but again, it's your game, it's your gaming group. You can choose how you want to do it. And you can also choose how you want to do your scenario level and all those kind of things. So that's all very malleable, and just depends on what kind of game you're looking for and how hardcore you want to play versus just kind of more of a lighthearted, enjoyable experience without necessarily being very stressful. I'm not passing judgment on either way. Do it how you want to do it, and how much fun is going to be fun for you. So I'm thinking we might be able to set up a leaping cleave here, because these guys are kind of clustered together, which means we probably want to have at least some card that we can move with. And I don't know how fast we want to go is the big question. So we probably want to use something. Let's see. This will be a good... Leaping Cleave goes at a 54. We could... 54 is not very quick, but we kind of want to go slow here. We're gonna tell our Scoundrel friend that we're gonna go pretty slow for the brute. So we're gonna select that card. We're gonna flip it over and place it here. And we are going to we're going to use trample or warding strength. I want to use warding strength right here. So we've selected our cards. And again, you'll be doing this simultaneously with multiple players. Obviously, as a solo player, it's going to take you significantly longer. to do a strategy because you are playing every player. So we don't know, we're not supposed to know how fast the Brute is going, but they said, oops, sorry, I need to stop holding Alt on that. But we want to go probably after the Brute. We don't want to run up there. You really don't want to run up there and hit people because you don't want to get hit in return. Whereas if we stay back, for example, and they have to move forward and can't reach us, then they've already used their turn. So that's the strategy I'm employing right now, and something that you will learn as you play the game more. You really don't want to run up to enemies. What you want to do is play with the initiative as much as you can. So if they haven't engaged you yet, you want to go slow, let them come up to you, ideally. And then once you're in melee range, then you want to go fast to try to outpace them. Or, for example, I could pull somebody, although we're not in range yet, are we? 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope. Poison would be probably a nice thing to do here. We could set up a attack poison. And I'm definitely meta-knowledging a little bit, knowing that I would go after the Brute, which is also probably good. In fact, we can do the attack 2, gain 1 experience when the target is adjacent to any of your allies. So we're actually going to be using that. But we don't want to go too quick. We want to go slow. And I think we are going to use... Boy, the scoundrel can't actually go too terribly slow. We're going to use Venom Shiv's bottom. So that's the idea. So we've got our cards set up. So now, when I select, open the battle interface, I'm going to select Start Round. And what it does is it adds everybody to an initiative tracker in the upper left corner. Again, this is just the mod. If you're playing Gloomhaven Helper, it will do the same thing. If you're playing the physical game, you're just going to have to look at all the numbers of everybody's either top-faced card or left-faced card, however you want to denote it, where one of your cards is the initiative. And then the opponent also gets to draw a card, and this mod automatically does that. And that determines what our guard friends are going to do and when they're going to do it. In this case, it's really interesting because the Brute goes first, then the guards go, then the scoundrel goes. So at this point, now that you've selected your cards, now you know what the enemy is going to do. The Brute goes first. They can actually choose, okay, do I want to change my strategy based on what I know that the guards are going to do? The Brute strategy was to run up and try to hit multiples of them, which I actually can't do because I did not select I only have a move 2 here, so I kind of screwed this up a bit. If I want to run up and melee them, I will have to do a move 3 on the bottom, so I can go 1, 2, 3, and that would force me to use the top half of Warding Strength, which isn't bad. It'd be an attack 3, and it would push one of them 2 hexes away from me, which isn't going to matter too much because they have enough movement. Actually, the elite has less movement, so I could push... well, let's see. If I push them 2 hexes away, and then they've got a movement of 1 this turn. So you'll have to do the math. Every time that they draw a card, their modifier deck will actually modify what they can do on their base stats. And it's obviously different for normals and elite. So right now what they're going to do is they're going to move at a -1. So the normals are going to move at a 2, and the elite is going to move at a 1. And then they're going to attack the nearest melee opponent with a +0 modifier. So their base is a 2 for normals and 3 for elites. So they've got a 0 modifier there, so it's just a 2 or 3. And then they're going to strengthen themselves, which is a buff, and I'll go over the buffs and debuffs in a moment that they can do. So we could run up there, knock the elite away, and then it would not be able to reach us. The other 2 normals would definitely attack us, however. I think I am okay with that strategy, though. So we are going to use... So instead of my strategy, because the guards did not go before me and did not move closer, I'm instead going to use the bottom half of Warding Strength. And again, you can always use the top half of a card as a default attack 2, and the bottom half of a card as a default move 2. The reason I don't want to use the actual bottom of Warding Strength, and it sounds cool, in the next 6 sources of damage from attacks targeting you, gain shield 1. That is pretty cool, but it's a lost card, which means you permanently don't get that in your hand anymore. Now, in this case, it stays in the active area, because it is something that is on. You place it in your active area, and you use your little tracker tokens, located right here, look like that, to move it along. So for every time I get hit, I would move that each space, so it works 6 spaces, and then it's gone, and it is a lost card, which means it's permanently out of my hand. I can never use that for the rest of the scenario. You really don't want to use lost cards too much or too often. This depends on your character and how many cards you have in your hand, but in general, you need to be very careful about using lost cards. I could use it here, but then I wouldn't be able to necessarily attack, and it would be 1 less card And I don't want to use it for this opening room necessarily. It could be something I'll use maybe in the second or third room, but otherwise it's out of my cycle of cards for the rest of the game. So I'm using a default move 2 instead. So all of that to explain. Again, it's hard to teach this game without teaching a little bit of strategy also. So I was going to use a default move 2, but I'm actually not going to do that because moving 2, as you can see, would get me nowhere. Mode 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It does me no good. So instead, I'm going to be using the bottom half of Leaping Cleave to do a move 3. Jump means I can jump over obstacles. I won't need to here because the room is empty. And I will create the wind element, which I don't believe helps either of us at the moment. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Place myself right there. I'm going to create the wind element, which you can do that here, or air, I guess, sorry. Elements are created and consumed by different ability cards. I don't believe the Scoundrel or Brute. I think the... Let's see, is there any... Okay, there's one thing the Scoundrel has as an X card. So you can see that little symbol of the dark with the X over it means that if dark is available, you can consume the dark element to then do whatever it says here. So in this case, you add an additional +2 attack instead of 1, and you gain an experience. So certain classes, obviously like the mage, will make more use of elements than other classes. Enemies can also generate and consume elements. You have to pay attention to that. The one rule is you cannot generate an element with one card and then consume it on the next card. So you cannot use an element that you generated on your turn. After the end of the round, the element is moved from strong into waning. There is no difference between that other than the fact that after it is waning, the next round it will go into inert. So elements remain basically available for 2 rounds with the caveat that you can't use an element that you generated. Now, if the Scoundrel had an ability where they could consume wind, they could use that ability. If we somehow coordinated our elemental creations and consumptions, then we could do that, for example. But... for right now purposes, I don't think this air is actually going to do anything. So we move 2. We've used this card. So we go into the discard pile. And then we're going to use Warding Strength. So we're going to use, it's going to be an attack 3. And it's going to push our opponent 2 hexes away. We can choose who to target. We're going to actually target the elite here because we can push them 2 hexes away, which will be pretty useful given their ability card here. So when we attack somebody, we need to draw from our modifier deck. I have shuffled it. It right now, again, is that default deck, which are 1, 2, 3, and 4 for everybody. If I had donated 10 gold to the Sanctuary, I would have been able to put 2 Palest cards in there. And Palest cards act as additional ×2s in the deck. So they are really useful pretty much throughout the game. But especially if you are a just damage-dealing powerhouse, you definitely want those Bless cards. So we're going to attack 3. I can actually click on this button right here, which will automatically draw one of my cards. And I drew... Oh, crap. I drew the wrong character. I'm going to try that again. Sorry. I forgot I was the green. I was watching for it over there. We need to change to red. My bad, everybody. And now we need to click on draw. All right. So I drew the same thing, a +1. So that means I did 3 + 1 is 4 damage to this guard. Now, you need to check and see if there's any other things available. For example, this guard has a built-in shield of 1. Now, it's possible they can gain a shield during their ability card, but none of that comes into play until it's their turn. But this guard, the elite guard, only has a built-in shield of 1, which means they always mitigate 1 damage coming in unless I have a pierce, which then ignores up to that amount of shield. So I do not have pierce. So I actually did 3 damage to this elite guard. So you'll need to keep track of that. Obviously, for the physical game, you can add wound tokens. Here, I can just use the plus or minuses. And then I can choose to push them 2 spaces away, which I'm going to do. And I need to make sure that they are always literally 2 spaces. I can't just do like this, for example, because that doesn't create another distance space for me. So I need to go here, and that's the rules between push and pull specifically. I always have to either create or eliminate distance. And I'm pushing, so I'm attacking him and shoving that guard out of the way. And that is the Brute's entire turn. That is a discarded card. Now it is the guard's turn. So the elites always go first, and they always go in the order of their number standee that you pulled out. So it's always elites 1 through however standees there are, and then it's normals 1 through however. So the elite will go first. Now, a big thing about monster AI is, and this is probably the most complicated part of the game, is the monster focus. Monsters can only focus on the closest enemy to them. They will always focus their attacks. They will try to move towards that enemy as if they had infinite movement. They will avoid obstacles. They will avoid traps unless they absolutely have to hit the traps. And yes, this is probably the most complicated, convoluted part of the game. If you have not that many players, then it's not terribly difficult. With a lot of players and a lot of standees on the board, it does get confusing. Remember that enemies can move through themselves, but they will always focus the nearest enemy. So this guard, it's the nearest enemy by number of spaces. So this guard can reach me in 2 spaces, even though they can't actually get to me in 2 spaces because they have a movement of 2, and their ability card is a movement of -1, so they can only move 1. So on their turn, they're going to try to move towards me. Again, moving towards me as if they had infinite movement. They can only make it there. They would like to attack, but they can't. There's nobody in melee range, and they have no built-in range. And then they will strengthen themselves, which means on their next attack, they have advantage. And similar to D&D, advantage means they would draw their modifier deck twice and take the better of the 2, and disadvantage means obviously the opposite. You draw twice and you take the worst of that. But that's great because of that push eliminated that guard's turn, essentially. Now, the not-so-great part is the normal guards get to go. And again, in order of their number standee. So this one goes first. He's going to move towards the brute because the brute is way closer than the scoundrel. Doesn't need to spend all his movement, and he's going to attack me. He's got a base 2, and because he is attacking me, he gets to draw from his modifier deck to see how that is modified. So in this case, it's a +1, so that is 3 damage to the brute. Ouch. A lot of damage. You can see that. I mean, already it's getting pretty dicey. The next one doesn't even have to move to hit me with a melee attack. Again, a base attack of 2, draw a card. 0 means I take another 2 damage. Brute is hurting already. They also both strengthen themselves, so they are getting ready for even more pain on their next turn. All right, now it's time for the Scoundrel's turn. Scoundrel's thinking, hey, Brute, why did you run up there so quick, man? I highly encourage role-playing, as in, of course, entirely optional, but I think it makes the game a lot of fun. The Scoundrel's options, we could move 5 by using either bottom halves. And the top half, we can either attack 3 and give the poison condition, as well as earn an experience point. Or we can attack for 3 and add +2 to attack and gain an experience if the target is adjacent to any of the rogue's allies. So we could run up, let's see, 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We could actually run up and attack either one of them. Right now, the brute is saying, hey, please come up here and attack one of these guys. Maybe even take one out if you can. And the rogue needs to help mitigate some of this damage because clearly the brute cannot take really 2 or even 3 of them attacking him. They really need to take care of this business up here. So we definitely want to do the top half of Flanking Strike because we can do that on either of these normal ones. So we're going to use the bottom half of Venom Shiv. Now, you can use these in any order. I can choose to attack first and then move. You can choose to use the top half first and then the bottom half, or the bottom half first and then the top half. That is totally up to you. That's part of the flexibility you have after you've played the cards. So we're going to use the bottom half of Venom Shiv to do a move 5. And we're just going to go 1, 2, 3 to end up right here. And that is discarded. And when I'm clicking on this button, this is the discard pile. This is the lost pile. Those are 2 very distinct things. I'll go over discarded and lost cards some more in a moment. And then we're going to use the top half of Flanking Strike to do an attack 3. And we do activate the bottom section of the top half of the card, which is we get to add +2 attack and gain experience when the target is adjacent to any of our allies. So if we attack the elite, we don't get that because the elite is not adjacent to the brute. But this normal guard certainly is. So we're going to be choosing to target this guard. We have to declare that first. So we're going to attack guard number 3, normal guard 3, and we're going to do it with an attack 5. And then we have to draw a modifier deck on top of that. Is a +1. So we are going to do 6 damage, good old high damage rogue, to our guard. As you can see here, the guard only has 6 hit points. The normal guard does not have a built-in shield, so the rogue comes up, and because the brute is here, eliminates that guard, kills them. Gonzo. Now, when an enemy dies, it is obviously removed from the field, and we also add a coin. The game comes with a number of coins. We're just going to put one over here to the side. I'm going to copy and paste so I can always drag one over. And we're going to place it right here. So coins are added. Some of them are added as part of the scenario setup, and others, otherwise, a coin is dropped every time an enemy is killed. If you end your turn on a space with a coin, then you get to pick up that coin and put it on your character board or wherever you want. And then by the end of the game, a certain amount of coins are worth a certain amount of gold by the end of the game, which scales according to the challenge level you are playing at, which is what I'm trying to find right now. Here we go. So it's scenario level 1, which we're at now, at least we should be. It tried to spawn 2 on me. Every coin that we pick up is going to be worth 2 gold at the end of the scenario. We get that whether we actually successfully complete the scenario or even if we fail the scenario, we still get to keep that gold that we picked up during the scenario. So, but I can't move. I cannot continue my move once I've finished using one half of a card. I don't still have that movement to use, so that is over. So I can't keep moving and grab that coin, for example. And I've done my attack. Now, it also generates an XP. If you can't already tell, this is the experience symbol. And you gain experience. You do gain some at the end of a scenario for completing it. Again, that is denoted right here under bonus experience. Depends on that. This you only get if you do complete the scenario, however, successfully. You get the bonus experience depending on what level you're playing at. And you also earn experience as you play abilities. So certain abilities will just generate experience as you play them. So we can actually hit this button to add an XP to player 2, which is denoted by it depends on what edition of the game you have. Even early edition of the game, you'll if for physical folks, you'll have a little marker that you'll move along the board on your character board. Otherwise, you'll have these kind of dials that you can flip over to denote the proper numbers. So you'll have a dial that's got red and blue. Red is your health, and blue is the experience that you have earned. So you want to keep track of that because your experience will just go up and up and up throughout a scenario. And then at the end of the scenario, whether you win or lose, you then get to add that scenario into your character sheet. And then if you win, you also add the bonus experience that's listed depending on the challenge level that you've played at. All right, so that was an awesome turn for the rogue. That card is now discarded because we have used it. And then that is the end of the round as everybody has gone. We click on end round, and the things to do at the end of the round is this is going to, any elements are going to go from strong to waning, and any elements in waning are going to go from waning to inert. So we click end round, and that is automatically moved there in this mod. So if you're realizing now, we are slowly going to run out of cards. We're going to play 2 cards every turn. As we use them, they're going to be discarded, and at some point, we're not going to be able to play 2 cards. And what we'd have to do then is rest. So you can either, and this is where this comes into play, you can either do a short rest or a long rest, which is very much D&D terms. If we're doing a short rest, then we are going to declare it at the end of our turn or really at the beginning of your next turn. I'm pretty flexible at our gaming group in terms of like when you want to declare you're doing a short rest. It's supposed to be rules as written by the end of your turn, but we can wait till the end of the round or even before the next turn starts. It can be like, oh, let's say I short rested or something like that. It's not a big deal, but maybe it is for you. It, again, depends at your gaming group and your table. If you short rest, you look at your discard pile, you shuffle it, everything that's in your discard pile, and you take 1 card and put it in your lost pile. Then you take your discard pile into your hand. So that's how you get your cards back, minus 1 card, which is permanently lost out of the game for the rest of that scenario. If you long rest, you actually declare your long rest at the start of your turn instead of playing your 2 cards. So that allows you to do nothing on your turn but rest. If you do that, you go at initiative 99. You get to heal 2 hit points at the end of your long rest. And instead of randomly drawing a card out of your discard pile to put in the lost pile, you choose which card goes into the lost pile, and then you take your discard back into your hand. But if you realize now, either way, you are still permanently losing 1 card out of your discard into the lost. So that means every single character is technically on a timer. You cannot dilly-dally and wander around rooms looting and doing whatever you want. You technically have an overarching timer until your character permanently exhausts. Now, assuming you're playing at a decent level, you shouldn't really be anywhere near that until the final room unless you're burning through a bunch of lost cards. So this is where the symbols are important. So, for example, on Backstab here, it's a really great attack. It's kind of similar to the one we just used. It's an attack 3. You can add +2 attack and gain experience when the target is adjacent to any of your allies. And you can add +2 attack and gain another experience when the target is adjacent to none of its allies. However, and that's a great card, but if you see that symbol with the card on the X over it, that means it is a lost card, which means instead of putting it in the discard pile after you play it, you have to immediately put it in the lost pile. So that is a big deal because that's 1 less card that you're cycling through your cards in your discard. You're never going to see that card again. It's very, very tricky to use lost cards throughout the game. Think of the lost cards think of all these abilities as kind of once per or like at-will abilities, I guess, to use kind of 4th edition terminology. And your lost cards are your once per day abilities. These are your big nuke buttons. Now, not all of them might be giant attacks. They might be other things. But in general, your lost cards are a big deal, and you should be very, very wary of when to use them. Now, it's not to say you should never use them. You absolutely should. And I think a rule of thumb generally is you can maybe use one lost card every rest cycle, or maybe even every other rest cycle. But a lot of that depends on the class you're playing. So, for example, the Scoundrel only has 9 cards in their hand, so they can use lost cards. They're going to automatically last not as long as the Brute at 10 cards. So you can interpret that as being either the Brute could use more lost cards and the Scoundrel could use less, or maybe the Scoundrel just needs to go hard and, go hard or go home. The other one to look at is active cards, which are technically any of the ones which have that symbol of the kind of square with an arrow and the little S infinity symbol going over it. There's also another symbol involving I think the Brute has this one. Let's see. This one with a circle over it. Both of those kind of cards are active cards. And Tabletop Simulator, this mod nicely has either options for active, discard, or lost. So all the abilities I've been using were discarded. Again, I just explained what lost means, which means if you use that card as its lost mode, then that card is permanently lost, as if you had rested and got rid of it in your discard pile. The active card means it actually goes as an active ability that lasts for either the rest of the round, if it's like this. For example, you turn on Retaliate 2 and gain an experience every time you retaliate this round for the end of that round. And at the end of it, it is discarded. However, and same thing here with Shield. That lasts for the end of the round and for the bottom half of Provoking Roar. Brute actually has great examples of that. However, the other way to do that is with the... for example, the bottom half of Single Out here, which is on your next 4 attacks, targeting enemies adjacent to none of their allies, add +2 attack. That is an ongoing effect that is permanently on, but goes away after 4 attacks. And again, you track that with the little marker. So for example, if we were to play this card, up here, instead of going to our discard or lost, it would go into our active area. We would pull out a tracker and put the tracker on the first circle here, which is kind of tricky to do on the digital version. And then we have to keep track of it every time we would attack, it goes off. Every time we attack an enemy adjacent to other allies, then it goes off. Every time it moves off of an experience circle, we gain an experience also. But after we've done it 4 times and it goes away, then it's added to the lost pile. So think as active cards that have this lost symbol are essentially lost, but they just do ongoing effects while they're out. So you also have to be careful about using them too much, because while active cards are good, they are also out of your hand cycle. And again, especially characters with fewer cards in their hand, you have to be wary about using those abilities. That's the biggest point of advice and strategy when it comes to Gloomhaven, is using too many lost cards too soon. You will exhaust. If you have no cards that you can play, if you can't play 2 cards and you don't have at least 2 cards to long rest with in your discard pile, actually, I guess you would still take 1, discard 1, and put 1 in your hand. But either way, if you can't ever play 2 cards in your hand, then you are considered exhausted, and that has the same effect as if you had hit 0 hit points. You are out of the rest of the scenario. Now, you can still win the scenario if your allies complete the objective, so technically that can still happen, and that can be a thrilling end. And certain classes probably play a bit recklessly than others and will flirt with that, but nobody necessarily wants to not be able to play anymore because they played poorly, for example. So I'm trying to instill a little bit of strategy into this tutorial video, I guess is what I'm trying to say. All right, so that was the end of that round. So the next round, we can choose our next abilities here. I'm just going to go over maybe 1 or 2 other rounds before wrapping this up. So we know we're in melee range right now. The Scoundrel took out one of the guards, which is great. However, the next turn, these guards are going to be strengthened, which is really, really nasty. And the Brute is already pretty injured. So we want to go fast, because we want to go faster than the guards, because obviously if we can kill them before they get to go, then they don't get to hit us. So the Rogue is actually in a good position to double attack this Elite, because I'm already adjacent. Now, by double attack, remember, we can use the bottom half of one card and the top half of another. As you can see, most bottom halves tend to be moves. Actually, Scoundrel is kind of a bad example because it has a lot of loots and a pull. Most bottom halves have to do with moving, and most top halves have to do with attacking. There's a really cool card here. The top half is actually really shitty because traps don't usually come into play very often, although it could be definitely up there. But this allows us to essentially double attack, because we can use the bottom half of Thief's Knack to attack 3 on the bottom, and then we could use a attack on the top For example, and remember, we can always use a top half as a default attack 2 as well. So we could just use, Smoke Bomb or Backstab as an attack 2 without any of its special abilities. Especially because, again, you want to use those defaults for those lost cards because you don't want to. You still want to play those cards, but you don't want to lose them. So for that effect, you want to be able to play those default attack 2s or move 2s to avoid actually using those lost cards. We don't actually have another good top attack we can combine that with, other than would just be a default attack 2, unless we can convince the Brute to move one space closer by the time we move. But we're not going to count on the Brute here because we want to go fast, and we know the Brute probably can't move as fast as we can move. So our best option is just to use a default attack 2 on the top, which is probably going to be our Backstab. So we're going to put that here. We want to always make sure Initiative is our left card here in the Tabletop Simulator mod, and then we're going to use that bottom attack 3. And then we're going to switch over to our Brute friend. Now, the Brute does have a self-heal, which pretty much takes up his movement, because, again, most moves are on the bottom, but it's okay because we are near somebody. So we have to make a choice between the Brute healing themselves or ganging up on this elite guard. We're going to turn to the Scoundrel and say, Scoundrel, do you think you can take out that guard? Scoundrel's going to go, the Scoundrel's thinking, I've got an attack 2 and an attack 3, but the elite does have a shield of 1 and has 6 health remaining. So the Scoundrel's going to go, I'm level 1. I don't know if it's going to happen. We pulled the really good attack before. I'm not sure. So the Brute's going to sigh and be like, well, okay. In that case, the Brute is going to get a little more flexible and actually have a spare dagger here, because the spare dagger would allow us to range attack the elite without moving and still allow us to heal ourselves with the bottom half of Eye for an Eye. So we're going to do that. We're going to say 18 should be plenty fast against these guards. And then we're going to put spare dagger right here. So we're going to start the round. Ooh, the guards are going really fast. That's not good. We were confident with our 18, but look at that. The guards are going at a 15, which is really painful. So now we see what the guards are doing. They're going to put up an additional shield of 1, which means the elite is going to have a shield of 2. And then they're going to basic attack, and they're going to poison. That is nasty. Oh, man. Both our characters are not happy about this. The good news is the Scoundrel gets to go first, and they're going to side-eye the Brute and be like, man, I thought you were fast, bro. And the Scoundrel is going to still get their attack off. Now, if I wanted to, here's the interesting thing. These guards are not moving. They are only putting up a shield and attacking. So what I could choose to do is I could choose to use my movement, any kind of move, a default move 2 on the bottom if I wanted to just move out of the way. And that's not a bad play here because they're about to do some damage. And remember, they're strengthened. So they're going to do, and it only lasts until the end of their turn. So a good strategy here, again, they've got a basic movement, but they only do what their card tells them to do, which means some of them might not have an attack. So they might not attack that round. This time, they don't move this turn. So the Brute, unfortunately, doesn't have that option because they'll go before the Brute, but the Scoundrel does have that option. The Scoundrel could, instead of attacking twice, attack once, and then use the bottom half as a move too. Obviously, I'd attack with this one. Unfortunately, the top half of Thieves' Knack is no good here. It doesn't let me. I guess I could do a default move too, but I'd do that same thing here. And then I could use the bottom as a move 6 or a move 2, which is a bummer because I do want to get this bottom half attack 3 off. But if I do that, then I can't move. So it depends on how aggressive I want to be. If I think I can kill this guard by attacking him with an attack 3 and an attack 2, then I would do it. The problem is he's got that shield of 1. So this is really an attack of 2, and this is an attack of 1. So that's only 3 damage if I draw zeros, and there's a good chance I could draw worse than 0. So the fact that I can only really do 3, if I'm lucky, maybe I'll get a crit, but the Scoundrel is actually feeling a bit dismayed at this, seeing, you know what? I'm actually going to do what is called an uncanny dodge here, basically in D&D terms. Actually, it's a bonus action disengage, what I'm about to do. So I'm going to use the top half of, it really doesn't matter. Either one is going to be a default attack 2. We'll say it's the top half of Backstab. Maybe I'll get a crit here. So we'll do the top half of Backstab as a default attack 2. So let's draw that attack modifier. and it's a +0. So that means I would do 2 damage, but he's got a shield of 1, so I do literally all of 1 damage. Now, that other shield that he put up does not come into play until actually their turn comes up, and then this shield comes up, so he still only has the shield of 1. So I'm looking and saying, you know what? I'm seeing him wind up a giant attack, and he's strengthened. I'm actually not going to use my bottom half as an attack 3. I'm instead going to use that as a default move 2, and I'm just going to move right here. I'd love to grab that coin, but obviously I don't want to stick around in melee range. So I'm just going to move the hell out of the way, and I'm just going to pat the brute on the shoulder and say, good luck, buddy. This is going to hurt like hell. And that is the end of the scoundrel's turn. So both of these get discarded. So I actually end up using the default attack 2 and the default move 2 on both of these cards. And obviously I didn't get the XP there because I didn't actually do that attack 3 on the bottom. All right, now it's the guard's turn. So Elite goes first. Elite is going to put up his shield. He's going to attack, but there's nobody in melee range, so he does nothing. Does literally nothing. I don't draw a modifier. I don't do anything. The normal scoundrel, however, the standard one, is going to attack the brute. He's going to put up a shield of 1, which means he went from 0 to 1 because the standard normally doesn't have a shield. And he's going to attack the brute for 2 plus or minus 0. So he's going to attack the brute for 2 damage. And unfortunately, he's going to poison the brute. Now, there is a player. Let's see. Where are those? There's a player reference card. I don't know where it is in Tabletop Simulator. But there is a card that kind of tells you at a glance. There we go. What all the debuffs do. It's kind of a lot of board games come with this. It's nice little iconography that tells you what all the things are. It is double-sided. Just kind of a nice reminder, and there are 4 of these for 4 players. But the effects, real quick, as we go in order. Disarm means you cannot do your... And all of these end at the end of the round in which they weren't... Let's see, how do I describe this succinctly? If... They last for 1 full round. Let's say that. So if you afflict yourself with one of these, like you stand on a poison trap or something, then it is turned on until the end of your next round. Normally, if an enemy is giving this to you, or if you're giving yourself, a buff, it's available until the end of your next turn. So, for example, the strengthen that they added at their turn is going to be available until the end of this coming turn. Oh shit, they're strengthened. That's right. Ha! Remind me, so he gets to draw 2 modifiers. Okay, so they're both +0. So that was the strengthen right there. So this guy used up his strengthen because he didn't even attack, but it still ends at the end of his turn. And then this one just used his, but he drew a 0 each way. So see, I'm already missing things. It's very easy to miss all these different things, and you will miss them quite a bit. All right, so real quickly going over the status effects. Disarm means you can't use any attack abilities. Invisible means you cannot be targeted at all by enemies. Very rarely enemies can go invisible, but usually it's the players. Immobilize, same thing like disarm, but for movement, you can't move at all. Wound means you take a damage at the start of each turn while you're wounded, and it lasts until you are healed. Wound and poison are the only ones, to the exception of ending at the end of the next round. They are ongoing effects. They're really nasty. Stun is like immobilize and disarm combined, except you really can't do anything at all, including if they had healing effects or anything else. You just cannot take your turn. You can still rest if you're stunned for a player. You can't do anything else. Poison means it's kind of weird compared to wound because I feel like they should be changed. But poison means any incoming damage is increased by 1 before the modifier is drawn. So that's pretty bad because you are taking additional damage. It also blocks healing to where poison only goes away, similar to wound, once you're healed. But unlike wound, once you are healed with poison, it only gets rid of the poison and doesn't actually heal you. That's actually kind of the worst effect. It basically blocks your next heal completely. Strengthen and muddle are the same thing, just different sides of the coin. You either have advantage, so you get to draw 2 and keep the better one, and muddle means you have disadvantage. You draw 2 cards when attacking and keep the worse one. And then these are the wound markers, and this is the regenerate marker, which is included in the expansion pack, which I have not used yet because I have not beaten the Gloomhaven game yet. I do own the physical copy, though, because obviously, hell yeah, I'm going to play it as soon as we finish our Gloomhaven campaign. All right, that's all the status effects. So unfortunately, the brute is poisoned. So what this means is this really fucks up the brute. The brute was going to heal on his turn, which he's still going to. Now it is his turn, by the way. That was the end of the guard's turn. And as you can see, I'm just dragging status effects on top of the tokens here. You can just use these tokens to place them on your board for the physical game. So I'm still going to heal 2. And when I do that, all it's going to do is get rid of the poison. So I don't actually heal at all. I just get rid of the poison. And notice how the poison came after the attack. And that's how it always is whenever you're inflicting these status effects. They always come after the actual attacks. So that poison did not affect the current attack, but it would have affected any additional attacks that came at me. So instead of healing for 2 points of damage, I instead only get rid of the poison. I do generate the earth element for what it's worth. And that is the end of the bottom half of Eye for Eye. So I can still use the top half of Spare Dagger. Now, there is a penalty with attacking in melee with ranged weapons. You have disadvantage. Or I could attack this one. The problem is now he's got a shield of 2, so I'm not feeling very confident. This was basically a terrible, terrible turn for the players because the guards got such a devastatingly powerful ability, and the fact that the brute just went slightly too slow with a freaking 18. Nasty. So because I don't want that disadvantage, I'm still going to attack the elite guard, and the elite guard is damaged with an attack of 3, and it is within range 3, so we're going to draw my attack modifier. So that does 3 damage, minus his 2 shield because of this, means that only deals 1 damage to this elite. That was bad. We did 2 damage collectively. I do gain an experience for that, though. And that is discarded. Oh, that was a terrible, terrible turn. Yikes. So end of the round, the air element. Again, these characters don't use elements, but other characters will. Air goes into inert. Earth that we just created goes into waning, and we are fucking hurting right now. The brute is not happy about this. He wanted to heal up. Instead, he's even more damaged than before. The brute is thinking, what is the brute thinking? A disarm would be really good here. I mean, he's got some faster cards he can do, and then he can put up a shield. That would both be good effects. He needs to play maybe more defensively, while the rogue needs to try to dance around and do more attacks. Weirdly enough, the elite is still more getting closer to death. But we don't have a good way. Unless we move and push somebody out of the way, we could attempt to do that. Then we could attack. But I think we'd rather put up a... I think we want to put up a... oh, man, do we want to do that? If we do that, notice that we use both of our low initiative cards. We can't go at all fast in the future, so we'd be really blowing it all just to do that. So instead, I think we're going to work on attacking and disarming somebody, and then maybe we'll move and push somebody out of the way and hope that can lead to something good. So 10 is obviously a great speed. We're really hoping, and we're going to say, yo, we're going to go real fast. We're going to try to disarm and move some people around and not get freaking murderized because we're in trouble. Now, one interesting thing is if you get damaged, you can always negate that damage by burning a card from your hand or 2 cards from your discard pile. Obviously, you don't want to do that because burning cards is bad. Lost cards will eventually lead to exhaustion. But if you are going to die, literally, if an attack will kill you, then it's better than dying as burning a card. So that is an option, but it's like, if you're having to do that, you're in really bad shape in general. So the brute is saying, like, scoundrel, whatever you do, you have to come up here and at least, like, mitigate this damage if you can't kill this guy, because it's going to be nasty pants for me. Scoundrel says, all right, fine, quit your whining. I can go fast, too. In fact, I could throw daggers, which would be an attack 2, range 3, target 2. So if it has that on there, it means you can target 2 people within range. So I could attack both of them. Attack 2 is not a great attack, but I think that's still actually her best attack right now. But I could, well, I can't do 2 top halves. I can't do a move 2 and attack 2 and the daggers. I could move and then poison somebody, which would add, again, more damage to them. And then do a melee attack on top of somebody. Or I could try to spread that damage out. And the brute is probably going to move somebody out of the way and attack. So I think we're going to do... I think we want to do the daggers here, the throwing knives, at a 10. And then the bottom half is really probably just any move 2. I don't think we want to pull... Well, we could pull... no, that wouldn't really... I guess we are going faster than the... Well, actually, we're going to tie, so it's going to be our choice. Now, I wouldn't technically know that, but I'm kind of playing a solo game here. Yeah, we'll do the move. We don't need to heal ourselves, and it's only, unfortunately, that heals self. So we're going to do that. Let's start the round. Fucking guards got the same thing. So this symbol, for those of you playing the physical game, and I think we had this on the last one, I just didn't catch it. That is that tells you when to shuffle your cards. So you would draw this... whenever this comes up in the monster's ability deck, at the end of the round, that tells you to shuffle their draw pile into their discard pile. So they have a number of abilities, but these are only supposed to come up every so often, in other words. This is interesting. This means that they're not actually moving or attacking on their turn, but once they've gone, which isn't until the end of the round, they will put up a shield and retaliate. That's great for us. It means they're not doing jack shit, because we also went really super fast in front of their 15. I forgot guards can be damn fast. So if we tie, it's the player's choice right now, and given the fact that we can move and poison, I think the Scoundrel is going to offer to go first. It also means the Brute's disarm is not going to do any good here. And we're going to do our throwing knives first. It would make sense to poison the enemy first, but then that puts us in melee range because we have to target an adjacent enemy with our poison. We don't want to get the disadvantage. So we are going to throw our knives. We get to target 2, so we're going to actually target both of them together when we do throwing knives. It's going to be an attack 2, range 3, so we'll have to choose which one. Let's go after the elite first with our attack 2. And again, if I had items that would make this easier, I'd be flipping them over and using potions and choosing when to use my attack goggles and all that. So I'm just skipping that part of it. But your items are included in all of these attacks as well if we still have them to use. You can use them anytime during your turn. All right, so attack 2 against the elite. We drew a -1. That means it's 1 damage. Minus his shield of 1 is 0 damage. That asshole guard completely deflected our knife. And then we have a target 2, so we can target this one with an attack 2. 0, so that will do 2 damage, and he does not have a shield. So we do 2 damage to that guard. We also generate an experience. And that one is discarded. And then we can use the bottom half of Special Mixture to move 3 and poison an enemy. Now, which enemy do we want to poison? Because we can move 3, pick up this coin, and poison somebody. We're going to talk to the Brute now that the cards are out and say, Brute, what are you going to do? Who are you going to attack? Because that will determine who we want to poison. And the Brute says, well, the guards aren't really doing anything this turn, so I guess poison whichever one we can kill first, which would be the standard enemy because he doesn't have the shield. So we're going to do a move 3. We're just going to move 2 and take this coin. So we're going to put that on our character sheet. This one was discarded. Oh, sorry. And we need to poison also, which I need to grab a poison token because we can poison any adjacent enemies. We're going to poison this one. So is poison now. It is the Brute's turn. And the Brute is going to use his attack 2 and disarm. Unfortunately, disarm isn't going to do any good here because the guards haven't gone yet. So it would affect their next turn. And their next turn, they're not even attacking anyway. So this disarm is kind of useless. But that's part of the strategy of the game is you don't know what they're going to do. You just try to have to plan for that. We could use Overwhelming Assault. It obviously does a massive attack, but notice how it's a lost card. It's a once per combat encounter, once per scenario ability. Although things are going rough for us, we still don't want to use a lost card if we don't have to. So we're going to attack 2, especially because we got good luck on this one. So we're going to do an attack 2, but because he's poisoned, it's really an attack 3. Oh, we need to switch characters. Can't forget to do that. All right, so attack 3 on the standard guard. Can we get a +1? Oh no, a -1, so it's only 2 damage on the guard. A Scoundrel is going to side-eye us pretty badly. So that one is discarded. Then we can use the bottom half of this one as a move 3 and then push one enemy 2 spaces away. This is going to be tricky because we could move here and push that one back there and hope that he gets another slow movement ability. But the Scoundrel also likes having us next to somebody. So I'm not actually sure what to do here. We'd have to coordinate. Again, we'd be coordinating with our Scoundrel, being like, so where should we go? Because remember, the Scoundrel can still do this, get a massive attack off if I remain near them, which would guarantee a kill here. So the Scoundrel's going to say, look, I know you want to move those guys around, but they're just going to catch right up to us. Just stay put. And the Brute says, all right, fine, but don't let me die. So that is discarded. So we're just not going to do anything for that card. Discard. Guards put up their shield. Now they turn on their retaliate, which retaliate means you automatically deal that much damage back in melee range to an opponent, which would be awful, but we already went, so it doesn't matter. We just got good luck on this round, so that is the end of the round, and notice how the simulator mod automatically shuffles that card back into the deck. At this point, you probably already know how to play Gloomhaven. I'm just kind of running through the actual combat round, so you can obviously continue to watch me. I'm going to go ahead and finish off probably this first turn cycle and at least get to opening the door. The only rule I didn't go over is that once you enter a door tile with your movement turn, with the movement part of your turn, your movement temporarily stops. You generate all the enemies in this room, and they are immediately drawn ability cards, and they enter into the initiative order. Now, you can still finish your turn, including finishing your movement, I believe. But then all the enemies that haven't gone yet in the initiative tracker still get to go. So there's no such thing as a surprise round in Gloomhaven. So opening a door is very tricky because you automatically trigger all those enemies for that round. That's the only thing we haven't really seen yet. And the nice thing is the Tabletop Simulator mod automatically generates the enemies as soon as I click that open button. I just want to go over real quick some easy to miss rules. Remember to check and double check the math for scenario levels. Again, it's the average of your party level divided by 2, which determines your scenario level. Of course, you can always play at whatever level you want to, increase the difficulty if you want, or decrease it. Remember to deal battle goals at the beginning of each scenario. Everybody gets 2 and can keep 1. Yes, I have played several scenarios where we didn't get battle goals until like halfway through the match because I completely forgot. That is something that is easy to forget. Remember to read any additional text on the scenario itself. For example, this one, especially Tabletop Simulator mod, this one doesn't show it, but when you're supposed to read, I'll zoom in so you can see the mouse. When you reach this door, which has a number 1, you're supposed to read this flavor text section right here. So just kind of remember to glance back at the scenario book every once in a while. There'll also be maybe some special rules involved, like you're supposed to shuffle in some curses into your deck, which are extra misses or some -1s or some extra effects. So just make sure you keep on top of that. Strategy-wise, don't use lost cards too much. Try to work with your teammates without being too specific, unless you want to. I mean, it's your game group. You can choose how open or not open you want to be. In addition to playing all these scenarios, at any time you can also play random scenarios, which are these cool random decks, which combine location cards with monster cards that determines like where the monsters spawn. You can do 3 of those rooms together, and that counts as a completed scenario. You can also replay any scenario that you've completed, or you can play scenarios that you've locked yourselves out of because of choices you've made on casual mode, which just means you don't get the bonus rewards listed at the end of the scenario, which are listed. Well, this one doesn't have any, but at the end of scenarios, they usually be like, here's some gold or prosperity or something. You just don't get to get those. But you can essentially play scenarios outside of the narrative of the campaign in a kind of like arcade type format. So there's just plenty of content here. If you want to stick around, then I will play out the a few more turns at least, just so you can get kind of a feel for the general strategy. But feel free to bow out now if you haven't already, because you should have the basics of playing with Gloomhaven. For treasure tiles, real quick, same thing with the coins. You have to end your turn there on the treasure tile. When you do, you then loot that treasure token, and those are found in the back of the I don't really want to flip through all these. In the back of the scenario book, you go to the very end, and they're listed by number, and that determines what you get with that chest. They're usually pretty good, but obviously it's hard to get all the way back there. And know that the scenarios typically end when you kill all enemies. Not all the goals are the same. Make sure you double check your goals, because some of them are just like you have to loot certain things or reach certain areas. Most of them involve killing all enemies. You still get to finish out the rest of that round. But then once the round ends, after all the enemies are dead, then the scenario is done, and you get to keep whatever you've looted, and whatever you didn't loot, you don't get to keep. And remember, you're on a timer, so all these enemies will be dropping coins, but you don't necessarily want to run back and pick up coins, because that takes turns, and you're playing cards every turn, and you will eventually exhaust. So that's part of the strategy, is not falling behind. You have to keep moving forward, so there is that time pressure there. So thank you for joining me. If you want to bow out, feel free to do that. Hopefully you have a better understanding of how to play Gloomhaven, as well as maybe how to operate this Tabletop Simulator mod. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments, but at this point I will continue to play out the rest of this round as we enter, what are we in, like round 3 or 4, I think, by now. All right, so if you are still here, let's finish this thing. We're actually really close to having to rest. We're not doing very well, frankly. Single out would be the best thing to do, because I could do that on top of this one. That would really be a massive overkill to do that. In fact, any attack 2 would freaking kill him. The rogue would love if the brute could just kill him and then move over here, and then the rogue could get off a pretty big attack. The problem is the rogue can either go super fast at a 12 or pretty slow at a 64. And we'd probably want to go fast here, which requires us to use Smoke Bomb, which would necessitate a default move or attack 2, because neither the pull nor the invisibility is going to help us much. Invisibility will be great in the future when we have to like open a room or we've got a bunch of people about to kill us. We can have that invisibility ready to go with Smoke Bomb, but it's just a once per round invisibility and then it's lost. So we have to be very careful about using that. So we still want to go fast, so we're going to use Smoke Bomb. We can either use it as the top half to do a default attack 2, and then neither of these bottom halves are any good, or use the bottom half and use the top half as probably single out and just go all in on this guy right here. Be the best thing to do. So the Scoundrel's going to say, I'm going to go fast, I'm going to kill this guy. The Brute's going to be in a weird situation where, well, you know what? And the Brute can do whatever they want, because even if we're tied, as long as the Brute doesn't go earlier, then the Scoundrel will actually get the hit. So I think that'll work out pretty well. The bummer is, I was hoping to rest after these enemies are gone, but the Scoundrel is going to run out of cards the next turn, as you can see. All right, so Mr. Brute, never did get any of your good AoE attacks off. Pierce would be great against this one. So, can you go decently fast? Only if you do a 15. So you could go fast and then do an attack 3. God, best case scenario, we both go fast, we kill both of them this turn. Let's try and do that. Let's think positively. So we're going to go to 15. We're going to plan on using the move 2 of this card to move us closer to the elite. And then we're going to use the top half of Trample to attack the elite. With the assumption that the Scoundrel said, don't worry, bro, I got this guard wrapped up. Start round. Guards are going at 30, which is great. It means we go before them. The guards are going to actually do a move +1, which doesn't really matter because we're already locked in melee, and attack -1, so that's pretty good for us, but hopefully we'll kill them before they can do that. The Scoundrel is going to be first, and we are going to use the top half of Single Out, which is an attack 3 and +2 attack, gain an experience. Win the target, and just switch over to Scoundrel. When the target is adjacent to any of your allies, which the Brute is, again, Scoundrel loves having melee allies, so that means it is going to be an attack of 5, plus he's poisoned, so it's a base attack of 6, and we're going to get an experience. Let's draw our attack modifier. Thank goodness we did not draw that miss. That could be brutal there. Instead, we annihilated this guy with an insanely big attack. It drops a coin right there. And that generates an experience for the Scoundrel. That card is discarded. The other one we have is a pull 2 at range 3, or we could turn it into a default move 2. The Scoundrel is going to say, look, do you have this? To the Brute. And the Brute's going to be like, I mean, if I don't whiff, I should be able to kill him. Because the Scoundrel would love to run over here and grab this coin. But if the Brute gets attacked, he can't really take much more damage. So it really has to assume the Brute's going to get it done, and it's got a default. He's going to have a base attack of 2, so the odds of him drawing a +1 are still pretty decent. So Scoundrel's going to say, all right, dude, I'm going to trust you have that. Brute's not going to be happy about this, but Scoundrel, I mean, it is a Scoundrel. He's going to use the bottom half as a move 2, move right here and grab this coin. Rogues want coins, man. Sorry. So that is the end of the Scoundrel's turn. We go to initiative 15, which is the Brute's turn. Brute is going to use the bottom half of Shield Bash as a default move. So I'm using a lot of these default attacks and moves 2s. You probably won't have to do too much of that once you customize your hand a little better and kind of have a feel for your cards, but I'm having to kind of work with what I have here. We need to get in melee range, so we're going to use a move right there, and then we're going to use the top half of, it's discarded. And had I used that shield, it would have been an active ability had I wanted to use the actual shield, but then I wouldn't have been able to move. So we want to be able to move up to him and attack. So we're going to use an attack 3, Pierce 2, which means we can ignore his shield and just do a straight attack 3. Come on, good attack modifier. I need a +1 to end this guy. Let's let that happen. It's a +0. We did 3 damage. 1, 2, 3. Not quite enough. Brute is not feeling good about this. So we pierced through his shield, but we didn't quite get it done. That's discarded. Brute is going to suck in some air real quick and make sure this guard who's left alive isn't going to kill him. So the elite guard obviously focuses the Brute as the closest enemy. Movement doesn't matter because they're already locked in melee range. And he's going to attack at -1, which means he's got a base attack of 2, but gets to draw his modifier. Oh no, it's 3 damage. This is the worst case scenario. The Brute is not happy about this at all, because if the Scoundrel had just stayed right here, then they would have been tied, and the Scoundrel would have been higher in initiative, and the Scoundrel would have taken this damage. Instead, the Brute takes 3 damage, which means he can either die and essentially be gone from the scenario, obviously not what we're going to do, or he can choose to burn a card from his hand, which is also not great to have to do that, but he's going to choose to literally lose a card instead of taking that damage, and he is not pleased about that. He's really bitching at this Scoundrel, saying, I hope that coin was worth it, dude. And that is the end of the round. And unfortunately, now neither side has cards available to play, which means I have to either short rest, neither side of my players, or long rest here. So the Brute is going to say, look, man, I'm hurting. I need to long rest and heal. You need to short rest and come kill this guy before he freaking kills me. And the Scoundrel says, that's fair. I'll do that. So the Brute is not going to play any cards this turn. In Tabletop Simulator, we're actually going to click on the long rest button, which tells it that I'm not going to be play cards, but I will still be at initiative 99. And if I had items that I had used, which is one reason the scenario is more difficult, because I didn't actually put items in. So, for example, the boots or the leather armor, ones that could be tapped, to use a Magic the Gathering term, they would then be refreshed upon me resting. Since I don't have items, it's not going to matter right now. The Scoundrel, however, is going to be short resting. So again, we'll say the Scoundrel short rest at the end of their turn. Now, I'm cheating a little bit here. Technically, as the rules is written, you are supposed to declare your short rest at the end of your turn. But, and I think they've even said this in the FAQ, or maybe Isaac Childress has said this at some point, you can be pretty lenient about when exactly you want to short rest. I think in general, you can choose at the end of the round to short rest. And we even wait, like I said, this is technically the beginning of the next round as we're choosing our cards. Now the Scoundrel is choosing to short rest. That's totally fine. I think it's totally fine anyway. And it's a co-op game, so it's your damn choice on what to use. So with short resting, it means we have to shuffle our discard. We have to pull 1 card out as permanently losing this card for the rest of this scenario. So we lost our throwing knives. And then we get the rest of the cards in our hand. So the Scoundrel is back in business. So the Scoundrel can immediately go this turn. Obviously, we need to run up and hit this guy. And we could use an overkill. Kind of looking and see what our options are. We could just do a move to... Ooh, we could do a move to an attack to, and then move and grab the next coin. That would be pretty funny. That he's going to drop and end up with all these coins. We need to go fast, though, before that guy gets to go and murder our poor Brute. So if we want to do a move to attack to, we need to use a fast card on the bottom. Either our 12 or our 4 or our 6 should get it done. Let's go with our 6 right here, because we're going to use that as a move. Bottom. All right, so we're going to start the round. So we didn't put any cards for the Brute because he's long resting. He's at 99. The guards are going at 50. This is their defense. This is what they should be getting more often than not. This is half their deck is their just basic move and attack. The Scoundrel with a 6 definitely gets to go first. We're going to use the top half of Quick Hands to do a move to and an attack to in 1 half action. So it allows us to move here. And as long as I get a +0 or better, this guy will die because he does have a shield of 1, but he's only got 1 health left. So we're going to draw our attack modifier, and I got a +1. So I do 3 damage, minus his shield of 1 is 2 damage. That is a dead elite guard. Thanks, Scoundrel, says the Brute. Put that coin there. This card is discarded. So notice how immediately there are going to be different rest cycles here, because this guy rested, whereas the Scoundrel's already going. So there's going to be some interesting dynamics created whenever one person has to rest and the other one's still attacking. And it gets even crazy when you have 3 or 4 players. So now I can use the bottom half of this one. I could open the next room, but remember, all these enemies would start spawning in and charging down here. I don't know if I want to do that this turn while my buddy is still resting. So instead, I'm going to use the bottom half of this move to grab this coin. If I had more players, I would probably have opened the door, because, you don't want to dilly-dally too often. You want to get going, but Scoundrel likes loot. We're going to move and grab it. That is the end of the... Well, technically not the end of the round. The Brute gets to long rest, which means he heals 2. which if I was poisoned, that would, for example, only get rid of the poison, that kind of thing. He would refresh any spent items. He gets to search his discard pile. Unlike the scoundrel who had to randomly discard, I get to search for a specific... Oh, shit. Did I hit deal? Nope, I hit draw, I think. Okay. That was in there. Search for a card to then put in my lost pile, as in I have permanently lost this card. Thinking disarm can be pretty useful. Probably eye for an eye, although healing... is that my only heal? That's a bummer. I don't have a healing potion either. We are... Let's see, that's... Shield is pretty good, but the attack stun is a loss. We are going to get rid of our... No, we're not. We're going to keep that... We're going to get rid of Shield Bash. All right, so we're going to lose that one, and then we get all of our cards back. All the rest of our cards back. So that is the end of that round. So now the start of the next round, we've got fresh players. So I just want to show you real quick what it looks like when we spawn new enemies. Let's just go real quick and say that the Brute is going to... you know what? The Brute is actually going to turn on Warding Strength on his turn. And I don't have to turn that on yet. We need to move, though. We need to still move up. And then we can turn on Warding Strength. So let's move up with this one. We don't have any top halves we can just turn on, do we? Eye for an eye, I guess. We're going to move 1, 2, 3. We're probably not going to get hit with eye for an eye. I'll try it. Nope, not Provoking Roar. That's the wrong one. Where's eye for an eye? Oh, that does have our heal on the bottom. Shoot, we don't want to use that either. Oh, it's tough choices. Tough choices. And we'll have Provoking Roar. And then the Scoundrel. I realize this tutorial video is super long, but hopefully you've enjoyed just me playing Gloomhaven for the moment. This would be a great time to use Smoke Bomb if we need to use that. We don't really want to jump into that room, though. We do need to open the door. I really wish we had our throwing knives. This would be a great opportunity for throwing knives. But alas, we lost that one. I could have chosen to take 1 damage and drawn another card out, but I don't necessarily what cards. Know what cards I want to keep anyway. Yep, none of these are... Because we have to move. I believe we could still move up, but I don't want to move too far into that room and get hit either. I want to keep single out for its top action. Let's plan on having a... We can't use the top half of that one. Got both of those ready to go. Use that one, which is going to be our movement, most likely. And we'll do that one. All right, so let's start this round. So this is going to be a funny round because we're the only ones here. Oops, I forgot to delete him. Had I deleted him, it would not have added him to the thing with Tabletop Simulator. That's my bad. In fact, to make it... Well, okay, what's going to happen is the Scoundrel is going to go first. We can do either a move 3 poison or a move 5 to get to that door. We're going to do a move 3 and poison. So we're going to go 1, 2 to land on this door. And when we do, we're going to click this button. And that's going to spawn all these new enemies. You can see they automatically spawned. It did not add them to the initiative tracker. It doesn't do that in Tabletop Simulator as far as I'm aware. So I will have to draw. I think it uses the same card out. And then the archer would have to draw and then be added. I'm not going to play this one out. I would have to change this one back to 1. I'm not sure why the game gave me a level 2 freaking level at the beginning, but that archer would not be as powerful as it says it is at the moment. So what would happen is, even though the archer has a higher initiative, I still get to finish my turn. So I moved 2. I think I would still be able to move 1 more space to do a move 3. Or in this case, even move backwards into the room, which is not a bad call because both of them will get will come up here. So I think I can go 1, 2. I'm teaching this video and I'm saying I think I can do this. I'm pretty sure you can finish your movement after you open the door, and then I could get off an attack. But unfortunately, none of them are in melee, so I can't actually use my attack. So that would be discarded. Now that I've gone, we go back up, and we actually would do the archer's turn next, so that nobody gets skipped when you open a door. So the archer's just got a basic move and attack, which level 1 is a move to attack 3, but has a range of 5 for the elite. So it would move 2, 1, 2, range of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a good thing I didn't sit in that door because he'd be able to plink me from there, which is awful. And it can't do anything without that. So then it would be the guard's turn. The guards would come at me, and then it would be the brute's turn to then come at them. So I think that will finally wrap up this tutorial video. You've kind of seen a full room completion at this point. If you were interested in watching more actual Gloomhaven play, we've got a Let's Play series of Gloomhaven on Tabletop Simulator that I play with friends that we are currently playing through. There are, at the time of this tutorial video, 5 episodes. We're hoping to put together a lot more. And hopefully, now that you know a good grasp on how to play Gloomhaven and you can join your friends without them having to spend an hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever it's been, teaching you how to play the game because you already know how to play. Again, if you have any questions or comments, or you want to point out something that I got wrong, because I assure you I probably missed something that I did not cover, please leave them in the YouTube comments. Thank you all for joining me for this video, and hopefully now you can be proper mercenary adventurers of Gloomhaven.